Zoe Hollowood from Liberal Voice for Women. Thanks so much for coming on Feminist Question Time. Can you tell us, to start off with, what's Liberal Voice for Women?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me on, Joe. Really appreciate it. So if I can rewind even a little bit before that for our international audience, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about the Liberal Democrat Party, which we're a part of. So the Liberal Democrat Party, it's a liberal party, so it does promote debate. It's no one enslaved by ignorance or conformity, all of these kind of really core principles, you know, free speech, freedom of expression, freedom of belief, they're absolutely ingrained into the party and into our constitution. And in the last parliament, after a number of by-election wins, we were up to 15 MPs, so still quite a small party. Used to be a significantly bigger party, and in 2010, some of you may remember, were in coalition with the Tory government. But in the election that's just gone, in July, we're now up to 72 MPs. So
wow.
significantly more influence in the House of Commons. So we get more select committee chairs, more time to ask questions and things like that. So the third biggest party. So, you know, quite important to have a party that's not completely captured by gender ideology. And so Liberal Voice for Women came about in 2021, and that's when we formally constituted, and I became the chair. And prior to that, I think it's fair to say when gender ideology first entered the Lib Dems, people, you know, we all know, people didn't really know what was going on. So I think if you look back on some of the early motions that were passed at our conference, because within the Liberal Democrats, they allow members to propose motions to pass at conference. There were these motions that were passed in 2015, for instance, that promoted the use of puberty blockers, talked about using the WPATH guidelines and all of this kind of thing. But the narrative was all, this is just the next civil rights movement. This is the next LGB movement. And there weren't many voices speaking out against it. So I think lots of things passed, and the party became captured quite easily with a few activists. And I should say, for those who know Stonewall, at one point, 4 of the Stonewall Trans Advisory Group were members of the Liberal Democrats. So, you know, a really quite active, knowledgeable lobby group was in the party, pushing forward on gender ideology. And without any voices pushing back, I think people just went along with it. Right, you know, and I think it took a while. I think probably about 2019, 2018, when Amy Challoner became a member of the Liberal Democrats. And I don't know if people know the case of Amy Challoner. I'm not going to go into it in a great deal of detail, but Amy Challoner, a trans-identifying male who left the Green Party after safeguarding concerns were raised, and then suddenly entered the Liberal Democrats, and people raised safeguarding concerns because Amy's father, I think there was a case against them for child sexual abuse. So this was a concern because they were Amy's agent. So concerns were raised. And so I think the Amy Challoner case started to raise questions, and people started asking questions on Facebook groups, and that's when they started to be able to connect with each other. And it took many forms to do this connection at first, and some people left and some people joined, but eventually what came out of that was Liberal Voice for Women, and you can look us up on our website, liberalvoiceforwomen.org. And you know, we're all about sex-based rights and child safeguarding. So as I say, in 2021, I became the chair. And in terms of the work we've done since then, so in 2022 at conference, we introduced a constitutional amendment to put sex back in the constitution, in part of the constitution, which talks about what we don't discriminate against. At one point it said gender, and then gender identity came in as it was supposed to be an additional characteristic we didn't discriminate against, but actually what happened was gender was removed completely. So you only had gender identity. You didn't have sex at all in there. Yeah, I know. I know, right. So So we produced a constitutional amendment that inserted sex, and that got passed in spring 2022, alongside putting in various other aspects of discrimination. And then in autumn 2023, conference was cancelled, the Queen died. And then in spring 2023, we tried to tackle women's quotas in the Lib Dems. Because at the minute, the quotas, which are supposed to be like sex-based quotas for internal committees, they allow self-ID, they allow people who identify as non-binary to be included in both categories. So it's a complete jumble, right? And it's not consistent with the Equality Act and the provisions within that for positive action measures. So it was a really quite a dry amendment, but of course we got accused of genocide, of not recognising valid trans identities. The most ridiculous arguments that you can come up with were obviously thrown at us. And so actually, when I got to stage to try and put this really quite dry amendment to the conference, a gentleman decided it would be better to move to next business and not even allow me to have the debate. And so I only got 2 minutes rather than 5 minutes to put the case forward. And what really surprised me is the number of MPs who came into that conference hall and voted not to allow women to speak about fairer quotas for women.
Was there a vote on whether you were allowed more time, or in what way did they vote against it?
Quite an obscure piece of, the standing orders. There's this one where you can ask to move to next business. So instead of allowing the full debate, so people to get up and talk about why they support the motion to constitutional amendment to amend the quotas or not, instead they just said, we don't want this debate to happen. And so I got 2 minutes to advocate for having the debate, rather than a full 5 minutes and then the full debate and the summation. So I was gobsmacked, and after, they were so angry that I'd even been platformed as well. Afterwards I got the most horrendous abuse, threats, the rest of it. We've all seen it. So it's been quite hard going in the party, but what we have been doing as well during that time, if I can talk a bit, not just about the conferences, we've been building our network. So although we only had 15 MPs, because of historical reasons and because of being in coalition, we actually have a really good number of peers in the House of Lords, around 80. And they are Liberal. And they're pretty horrified, some of them, at what is going on, about the shutting down of debate, about silencing people and not letting people speak. And, when the conferences were online, the moderators would just remove all our comments. Of course, a bit more difficult to do when you're face to face, but they still managed to with Move to Next Business. So we've been collecting together a group of MPs, and I think you've probably had other people on like Labour Women's Declaration or maybe Conservatives for Women who've talked about the cross-party work we do.
Yeah.
We hold cross-party meetings in the House of Lords where we bring in experts under the Chatham House rule. So, and people are allowed to come from all different parties to hear from these experts to try and educate them about the different aspects of gender ideology, everything from sports to trans widows, really quite a wide range of topics. And we've got a number of our peers who attend those, so that's great. So we've been building up that network, and we have some connections to some MPs, but then when there were only 15, that was quite tricky. Now there's 72. That obviously increases the diversity of thought on this and probably increases some people's willingness to speak out. I think, from a political standpoint, having 15 MPs, they always wanted to look like they were very together and that there were no differences of opinion, because they couldn't really afford it with 15 MPs. And one of them said to me, Zoe, look at what's happening to the SNP. They are tearing themselves apart. We cannot do that. There's not enough of us. We just cannot go into that territory. And that was kind of used as a reason to suppress the debate as well. So where we got to at the end of autumn 2023 is that we launched our little book, so Liberals and Women's Rights, which was great. And I will read a little passage from that in a bit. But and then we'd got to a point as well where we were applying to put an advert in conference literature for our Fringe event. Our very first Fringe event, it was brilliant. You know, we had lots of international speakers from around the world come in and giving their international perspective on gender ideology. And the party said, no, you can't have a booking.
Was this 2022?
2023, end of
Yeah.
2023.
Yeah.
You can't have you can't have an advert that you're willing to pay a ridiculous sum for.
Yeah.
No, and we said, why? And they wouldn't tell us why. And then again, they've not been allowing us we've applied for party body rates to have a stall at conference. They've said no for the past 3 or 4 years. We applied for a regional conference because, you know, the party's divided into little regions like East of England, etc. So we applied to do a stall at a regional conference. They said no, we were too controversial apparently to have. So we just got to a point where we were like, the party is never going to give us a platform. It's continually squashing this debate and not allowing it to happen, and silencing us. So I'm not going to go into the details of the how, but eventually we got the party to a position where they took legal advice. And the legal advice was pretty clear, and not that I would have come on here and necessarily spoken about it, but if anyone saw Mark Pack's speech, who's the party president, which means he chairs the federal board, which is like the strategy and the main decision-making body, he stood up on that stage and said, yes, the legal advice means that we can no longer sort of ban these women from having a stall. I mean, it was extraordinary. It wasn't a liberal case of actually, you know, a really positive liberal case of, you know, we welcome debate, it's important all sides of a debate are heard, nothing like that. It was, I'm really frustrated with the Equality Act, you know, there are those we would wish to have here and others, and he used the we as the party president. Now, wearing that mantle as the party president makes it sound like the whole party doesn't want us there. And I'll be really honest, I mean, we only heard on the Tuesday before conference on the Saturday that we had a stall, so it was a bit of a scramble.
And was this just last week?
Yes, this is just
yes. So you last Tuesday, you heard that you did have a stall.
Yes.
Yeah.
So frantic flyer printing and all sorts, as I'm sure you can imagine. Yeah, so we heard we had this stall, and of course, whenever you put yourself out there, you're a bit nervous because you think, will anyone come? Don't you? You think, well, I'm sure other people think like we do, but you know, and it was great. Honestly, like brilliant, like lots of people coming to ask questions. We launched our manifesto, which again, you can see on our website, or you can actually sign up if you're a Lib Dem member. And it's all just about supporting single-sex spaces and our language and data and things like that. Very sort of unobjectionable manifesto. You know, people had most wonderful conversations with people. So I'll choose a few if you don't mind, to just give you a flavour of the type of conversations. So one gentleman wandered over and said to me, he said, I've really struggled with this one. He said, because to me, this just sounded like the next civil rights movement, and LGBT just, you know, LGB just parcelled up, and this was the next iteration of that. He said, but as a liberal, I always like to look at things from the counterfactual and see and test and prod where the arguments might be against it. And he said, and when I did that, I could see there were some real issues. So there were some real liberal thinkers, and this is one of the party's longest, you know, been a party member for a long, long time. And, you know, that was brilliant to sort of hear liberals actually saying, actually, when you do look at this argument from a woman's perspective, and you think about the things like the sports and the prisons, you know, it's kind of obvious there's a clash of rights here. And if there's a clash of rights, we need to sit down and talk about it, right? You don't just tell the women they need to just shut up and get on with it. Another guy, again, another party bigwig, was talking to one of us, and he said, you should have never been banned. So that was great to hear. Another one came, I don't know if you saw, there was this gigantic trans flag put up outside the Brighton Conference Hall to protest our presence. And one guy walked past and he got into a conversation saying, "Oh, what's all this about?" And he told him, and that guy flew into the building to find us because he was like, "I agree with you, thank you." And stuff. So, you know, they advertised for us. So the more they kind of, and I'm not joking, our stall, you know, was, some of the stalls around us had put up trans flags, trans posters, and even though that was not their central aim, and this is what was interesting to me, because people talk about this a lot, how if you let gender ideology filter into your organisation, it diverts you from your true purpose, and you just end up having to sort of deal with gender ideology or identity politics type stuff. And that's what was happening, right? These stalls that were there to talk about, you know, Hong Kong or all these other areas, they were just decorated with trans stuff. And I was thinking, you know, really, guys, this is not what you're here to talk about. But, you know, it's fine. You know, they were fine to protest. And someone came up to me and said, it has not been unnoticed, the bullying and intimidation that's going on. And just want to say thank you for handling it with the quiet dignity that you guys are doing, and that you're just getting on with it. And we were, right? You know, they shoved us in this corner. But actually it made people more happy to come over and speak to us, and you know, it was really good. I couldn't have asked. I mean, it's not that everyone agreed with us, but the vast majority did, and we were one of the
so the vast majority of people at the conference, you would
the
say?
vast majority who came to our stall to
Oh, I
speak
see.
to us
Yeah.
did so because they agreed with us and they wanted to send it to our manifesto. And you know, there were women there who were like, I've always been a bit terrified to say anything about this, but I just feel like they're taking our rights. And you know, and they like, and some of them were quite elderly women, and you could tell, elderly women, you could tell this is quite a big deal for them, that they were really sort of out of their comfort zone, but they'd had enough.
Yeah.
Right? And oh, it was just wonderful. It was very affirming to speak to so many people.
I had a thing at the hustings. Bernadette O'Malley, who is our UK country contact, she stood for the Party of Women in my local area. And at one of the hustings, there was a Lib Dem woman standing in Southwest Hertfordshire. So at the end of it, I went up and said, "Oh, you know, you were great, but I wouldn't vote for Lib Dems because of your position on gender identity ideology." And she looked completely terrified of me just saying that. And I said, "Well, why do you take that position?" And again, she looked really confused and terrified. And I thought, as a candidate, that's really weird. She did talk about it, and she just said, "Oh, poor men or poor people, we want to support their poor people." And I was saying there's a clash of rights. And then she carries on looking quite terrified. And then her husband came over and was quite aggressive to me, saying, "Stop, I don't want you talking." He didn't quite say these words, but you know, like, "Stop talking about this. My wife's really tired." And I thought it's so interesting that she was unsure and maybe ambivalent about it,
Yeah.
didn't quite know how to express herself, but it was him policing her. And I think there are some, so anyway, my reading of some of these places are, there are some people who are actively pro. They want this going through. They want gender identity going through. And I would say, is an activist, and his wife was reasonably terrified. And yeah, anyway, did you get much of that? The sort of
So
people outing themselves as,
well, yeah, some people did. You know, one woman. So our fringe event was "Can We Talk?" with, you know, Helen Joyce, Alma Godow, and Laura Favaro, who all had experience of in academia and not being able to talk. And basically, she outed herself to one of the women by having one of our t-shirts, and she said, "I'm a little bit scared because, you know, my local party are here and they don't know what I think." And we're like, "Oh, you know, you don't have to wear your t-shirt." She's like, "No, I'm going to do it." And equally, it was the same with the lanyards. People were like, "No, I've had enough. I'm going." But on the flip side of that, I will just tell you. So, you know, there was the Sex Matters Lobby Day, which was the Wednesday before our conference. So Tuesday, I find out I've got a stall. Wednesday, I'm in Westminster lobbying, asking everyone else
that
to
was
sort.
the 11th of September, wasn't it? Something like that. Yeah.
So I hung around in Westminster Hall when people were green carding their MPs to see how many Lib Dems came down and spoke, and actually give them their due. a lot of Lib Dems were responsive to their constituents green carding them, and actually probably one of the most responsive parties. Maybe these new MPs, they're taking their responsibilities quite seriously to start with, so that was great to see. Anyway, there was this one particular MP, I'm not going to give their name, and the constituent couldn't be found, and so I took the opportunity to have a conversation with them. It was one of our female MPs, and I think she sort of doesn't necessarily agree with us, or maybe not yet. But I took the opportunity to basically talk about this in the context of liberalism and needing to have a conversation. And she said, yes, she said, we're pretty good in this party about being able to talk about, for instance, Israel and Palestine. She says, but on this particular topic, we just don't seem to be able to talk about it. People seem scared, just like you said. And I didn't want to get into it then, but I just wanted to say, yeah, that's because it's misogyny. It's because it's misogyny, right? It's women advocating for their rights, in particular in the face of males who are looking to invade their spaces and take their language. That is the vast majority of the clash of rights. And so unfortunately, there are quite a lot of misogynists in the party. I mean, maybe that's how it is in all political parties, I don't know, but it's not just on this one issue we see it. We've now got councillors coming to us to talk to us about, council leaders who've been accused of sexual harassment, and now suddenly they're finding that they've been removed from positions for advocating for the women raising these complaints. There's lots and lots going on, and I think because the misogyny has been out to breed for so long, because it's aligned itself with the identity politics, we really need to look at what's going on in the party now, because, for instance, the balance of women in the party, I think it's something like 65-35 in terms of the number of men in the party compared to the number of women. Again, that might be similar in other political parties, but it's not good enough, right? Women are 52% of the population. So what is it that we're not doing to attract women into the party, or why are women leaving as well? So, I think there are bigger issues, like you say, about people just being terrified to talk. There has been a stranglehold. For me, identity politics has created this, it's like an authoritarian entryist movement, and it creates a stranglehold on a party, and it doesn't care if it takes all the air out of that party. Its focus is gender identity politics, right? And it doesn't care about anything else. And I remember reading one of the Green exiles recently, her blog, and it said the hijackers are flying the plane. And that's what it's like. You've got people saying they just want to break the law. They want to be able to break the law and stop us speaking. I mean,
the misogynists have just taken back control of the plane, and we had about 20 years like women's rights and our supporters, where we went much too far, according to them, like with the safeguarding stuff. I think that they didn't like that at all. Lots of women speaking, women in positions of power. So in a way, I feel like we saw some progress. We got a little bit of maybe a steer on the plane, and they've taken it back. So it's like, but it's horrific, isn't it? But they're doing it under this name of doing good, of niceness,
yeah,
kindness.
they wear a cloak of compassion.
Yeah.
And I think inside it's either cowardice or misogyny, like you say, So it's yeah, I think there is something to it. I think there are some people who are genuine believers. Obviously, people say, so why are people in the party? They're so keen on it. I mean, some of them are trans identifying people, right? I can understand why some of them feel the way that they do. Some of them are parents who have trans identifying children. And, again, I can understand why they might feel so strongly about something. They've made decisions about children and things. I can understand why they feel strongly about something. But I think you're right. I think some of it is just some men who are just misogynists who are taking this opportunity to beat down on women again.
Yeah. And then, I mean, it's really, really good. And it's very, very heartening hearing from you and seeing the achievements of Liberal Voice for Women. Um, over the last few years, because it wasn't at all clear that anybody was going to achieve this much in you know, any groups were going to achieve this much in parties. So it's really positive. What are your next steps? What do you think you're going to do next? And is it do you have a program, don't you, of webinars and
Yeah, so we have our monthly events. I think, you know, we're going to consolidate after conference. We've got lots of new sign-ups. We've got our manifesto now. We've got 72 new MPs, you know, one of whom signed our manifesto. So, you know, I think we need to get round and have conversations with those other MPs and get to know them, invite them, some of them, to the cross-party meetings. And I think for some of them, it's, should I stick my head above the parapet on this issue? And I think the case has to be made that unless they do, the party can't operate as a serious political party that wants to take second place and be the opposition next time, because there's a stranglehold by these, you know, these quite illiberal activists. So I think there's the liberal case to make by going round the MPs, you know, and I think obviously next time we're at conference, we'll be allowed a fringe within the conference hall. So this time, again, we were off site because of the lateness. We had to sort of get going on, I think. And I think that will open up again to a wider audience what our views are once we're in the official programme. So I think there's stuff to be done with the parliamentarians, and I think there's stuff to be done with the members. And it might feel like it's a little bit incremental for a while, but I'm really encouraged by the conversations we've had, and it only takes so much to reach the tipping point. We've got internal elections for all our committees next year, within the party, for conference positions, to know, to decide which motions go to conference. All of these opportunities for us to be involved in, and I'm raising our profile in the party the whole time. I'm hopeful that incrementally, bit by bit, we'll nudge ourselves towards a tipping point and eventually, you know, swing that seesaw the other way. But
is how do people buy your book? The
yes,
that looks very
and
good.
a quick line from that.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so the last page. The UK needs a Liberal Party, but an authoritarian Liberal Party is an oxymoron that cannot serve any useful purpose. Censorship and obscurantism are against our history and our identity. Liberals debate. Liberals seek truth over falsehood, light over darkness, and freedom over oppression. And Liberals know that an equality that ignores women is no kind of equality at all. So the woman who mainly wrote this, just her prose is just amazing. So if you go to our website, or email us at info@liberalvoiceforwomen.org, or you can click on our website to contact us, and then we can obviously get your details and send a book out. So yes, please do. I think they're £3, so they're a bargain, plus
Yeah.
P&P.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well,